This is the No Stroke Podcast with your co-hosts David Dancero and Michael Garrow, helping you to support and thrive in life after stroke. Their podcast is designed for educational and community support purposes only and should not replace medical treatment and guidance of your own health professional team.
Welcome to episode 70 of the No Stroke Podcast. I'm Dave Dancero. I'm here, as always, with my co-host, Mike Garrow. Hi, Mike.
David, episode 70. I like the
Yes.
sound of it, another, we'll call it a milestone.
It definitely is. And Mike, we're five away from what you described to me as one of your goals, getting into the summer. Perhaps we have that oceanside meetup, right? Where we celebrate.
I think
75.
it's coming. The weather's turning. We'll we have the eclipse later this week. Are you psyched for that? Is that on your itinerary? I don't know. I'm not that excited.
I didn't know. Like, I remember in 2017 with my kids when they were younger, getting the glasses. It seems I didn't realize it was such a big deal. It's really getting,
People are going mad for it.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm kind of like they're like shifting around meetings at work so we could people could go see it. It's like,
yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just not up with the hype, but
no, and they're letting kids out. They're letting kids out early in my community because they don't want them to run outside at dismissal and look up and blind themselves. And I'm even hearing you're supposed to protect your dog and keep your dog inside. So I'm trying to be ready, but that's tomorrow. So we better get it done.
Guess so. Good weekend of sports for us. We went 2 for 3, I think, right? UConn girls lost.
Yes.
Final fourth. The guys won last night, and your Bruins took care of business.
Pulled off a big one. Yep. Yeah, I'm happy.
Yeah. So, anything else going for you this weekend? Let's start within the news. What do you got?
So in the news, so I've been, as you and I have talked in the past too, and I mentioned on the show, I've did some work down at URI, and very much excited about the early work they were doing around brain health. They have a new department down there in the last 3 to 5 years that wasn't there when I was an undergrad and grad, but it's all about brain research. There was an article that I subscribed to URI's magazine, and there was an article that I just want to mention and maybe put it out to our listeners too, because it struck me. I didn't know how this would come across to someone, especially if they weren't, if they were new to stroke or they were a caregiver to someone who had had a stroke recently. And they talk about the research that was on the forefront at URI. And of course, they announced the funding that's getting distributed down there around particular conditions. And I was, first of all, very happy that stroke was getting some new research dollars down there. But the title was, "Why Does Stroke Increase the Risk of Alzheimer's?" And they got a pretty substantial NIH grant of over $400,000 to look at why is there a connection between a higher risk of dementia and perhaps Alzheimer's with it after someone has a stroke. But the article, I quickly kind of got that, gut punch in my stomach after I read the opening line. And it said, studies have established that stroke can double the risk of Alzheimer's disease and dementia, but researchers don't understand why. And why it kind of made me think, and I ended up writing back to them, and hopefully they're going to follow up with my response to it in the next issue. But the editor to get back to me, and I said, you really need to back that statement up with some data, because if you're a new stroke survivor and having had the lived experience, you already have enough to worry about your immediate rehab needs, about getting back to work, and you don't need that in your back of your brain without saying, like, it would have came across better to me if it said, here's the data we have. They didn't talk about the experience being dramatically different depending on the support, the type, the age, pre-existing conditions. They just made that blanket statement, Mike. And I don't know, maybe I overreacted, but what do you think about that?
I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there when you're saying, right? Like, folks, especially new into stroke, I mean, even if you're a chronic 20-year stroke survivor, like, you have enough that's worrying you from having the stroke and now seeing this without the data. But unfortunately, like, it seems like that's the way kind of research
Yeah.
works sometimes, right? It's like, here's a problem, like, let's stir up some controversy and get some research dollars behind it. And, it's also probably the editor of that magazine, right? Like, going through this, like, they're not thinking, or they might not have that loved one who's gone through as an experienced stroke to kind of put them on the other side of the table, be like, if I was reading this, kind of how would I respond, right? Like, it's tough, and I'm sure reading that, like, you did have that gut punch, and you're like, Jesus, like, it's scary. But there's, and it's not just that. I mean, I feel like every time you turn on the news, it's, oh, if you don't, eat enough blueberries, you have a high risk of stroke. Like, there's so much that gets out there that, stroke and heart attack is like the number one thing that is a high risk, right? Where people just don't know where to turn to and don't know how to, like, what to trust these
Yeah.
days. So yeah, it's scary. I'm glad you did go back and write a letter to him. So
Yeah.
hopefully,
I'll keep you
hopefully
posted.
it could,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And again, I'm not being negative towards you. I just wanted to make them more aware that, bring the lived experience of survivors in. And it reminded
Yeah.
me of the episode with Dave Pacino and his Magic Wand, where he talked about,
Mm-hmm.
have someone be part of that experience, or if you're going to do research in that area, have that lived experience for not just a quick interview, but like he said, be in that person's shoes for 30 days and really see what life is like. It is, Mike, it has been on my brain as my brain has aged after. It is, I'm not going
Yeah.
to lie, like dementia, Alzheimer's, I know I am at a bit high risk. And that's why, you know, try to do everything else that I can to minimize, but we'll see what they come back with. And it kind of ties into, we had a great guest. We sat down at the end of the week and met with someone who's doing great work. I don't know if Mike, do you want to do the intro to that, or do you have anything in the news? Because this talks about one of the things that this episode really resonated. One of the things you can be doing at discharge, and that drop off, and exercise is a big part of that. So as we continue
Yeah.
this theme, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. I think, again, to your point around, like, these risk factors, right? Like, it's controlling what you could control,
mhm.
right? There's so much, like, the dementia, some of these risks, like, a lot of that, is out of your hands to a degree, but there's a lot you can do. One of the things which we've been talking about for the last few episodes here is fitness, and keep having that exercise routine that works for you. So last episode we spoke with Rory. Brilliant story, just brought us through his journey over the last couple of years as a stroke survivor, and where he is today. And a big part of his story was getting connected with a fitness called Fit to Function, right? And it was founded by Jenna Muri-Rosenthal. And Jenna, her background, we've had a couple folks on, right? And I mentioned it to her, the transition from, she started as a speech and language therapist and is now, working as a fitness professional, but really uses that experience as a therapist. And I think it's that, psychological aspect of working with folks who've had a neuro incident, whether it's, stroke, Parkinson's, MS, Alzheimer's, like,
Mhm.
knowing how to cater to those individuals really important. And Jenna's done a phenomenal job over the last few years to really see how, adaptive fitness and functional fitness kind of blends together. She started as a CrossFit instructor and has kind of built this niche of adaptive CrossFit for a neuro population. And, I think as she describes it today, in this episode, really breaks down the barriers that I'm sure a lot of people think of when they think of CrossFit, right? It's
Yeah.
it's really, like she explained, like, a squat is standing up off the couch, a deadlift is, you know picking something up off the ground.
Yeah.
You know, like it's simple body movements, but you know, when they get a lot of times, you know, it's the scare, like, you know, thinking of people squatting 500 pounds and, you know, snatching all this, like it's not, you know, it's simple movements. And, you know, I think as Jenna's gonna, you know, talk through here, um, you know, just the examples of folks that have come into her community, have built, you know, their confidence and really rallying and kind of having peers, um, you know, see that support is out there, right? Like we wish there was more Jennas, more, you know, facilities that could cater to individuals who've had a stroke and suffer from other neuro conditions. But I think the biggest thing I got out of this episode is, you know, there's the right prescription out there for you, right?
Mhm.
Like when it comes to exercise. And I think Jenna today will kind of explain how, one, like the industry is moving, you know, some of the work that she's doing with the Adaptive Training Institute. Is that it?
Yes. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
important to bring up too. We're going to put
Yeah.
that in the
And
show
like,
notes.
yeah, like, you know, we talk about like, all right, like how does a stroke survivor or a caregiver find another Jenna, right? If you're living in Wisconsin or you're living wherever, you know, like, so some of the work that they're doing there with like a directory to try to find some of these certified trainers for adaptive fitness. But yeah, it was a really good conversation. I think a great continuation from Rory and his experience to kind of speak now with Jenna from the trainer's
Yeah.
angle.
No, Mike, a great overview. And again, I agree. I think there needs to be a Jenna in every community in the states,
Yeah.
and another resource. And I think she's at the beginnings of something really special. But it's going to take hard work, and you know, we're glad that we can help showcase, as we'll encourage folks to also maybe watch the YouTube version, because she just opened a brand new facility, and there's needs that come with that. And you know, she wanted to make the content the focus of what we talked about, but we know that, you know, starting something like this isn't easy. So I want to make sure we also know and send folks to our show notes. There's three areas if this resonates with you and you want to help Jenna and the great work she's doing. She does have a fitness fund for helping build scholarships for folks who might have at the you know, to help alleviate some of the financial obstacles that come with being part of a great program like she offers. She also has an equipment fund, and as a new gym owner, that's a big obstacle. You can also support her through T-shirts and the swag that she offers. She has a great following on social, and you can check all the links. But I just wanted to make a quick shout out to all my friends who, you know, whether it be physios that hear her message, or I have a lot of friends in the equipment industry. And, you know, one thing that Jenna does, and we didn't really get to cover it, is when someone's new to exercise, Jenna lends a lot of her own equipment out to help someone who may need a little bit more to add to the work they're doing in her gym in their home. And she often lends out pieces of equipment to help continue to keep them moving. So any little bit of help and support would be great. But again, you know, I think we have to have Jenna back on at some point. I geeked out there at the end with her about BDNF and for brain derived neurotropic factor. That's what drives neuroplasticity, and that's what fuels the work she's doing. So love to get her back on. And also, Mike, she inspired me to sign up for the
Doing the
May run
5K.
that she's doing with Saya and a crossover
Nice.
promotion with Trenny's team. So I'm going to be seeing you again, Jenna, and maybe we'll geek out and run together and talk BD&F. So
Good stuff. Well, let's get into this one. Again, if you like the show, please subscribe, share, and consider becoming a supporter. You can head over to nostropod.com and click on show supporter. All right, here we go with Jenna Muri-Rosenthal. Hi, Jenna, and welcome to the No Stroke Podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Of course. And for those viewers watching us on YouTube today, you'll see Jenna in the new digs, her new gym facility. really excited to, one, congratulations on the
Yeah.
move. And two, yeah, really excited to sit down and have this conversation today. Um, for those of you who listened to our last episode with Rory, Rory and Jenna, have been connected here for how long now? It's been over a year or so, Jenna?
I think we're approaching a year. Yeah.
Okay. And, kind of staying in the theme of exercise and movement post-stroke, this conversation, we're going to delve into a lot of the work Jenna's doing for the neuro community in the fitness space, right? And we always preach around movement and exercise, how important this is. But today, what we're going to be touching on is just some of those unique factors. One, just the loss of therapy that so many people get, from an insurance perspective, that dries up. It's what's next, right? And what you're building, Jenna, is a brilliant model that we hope, as others listen to today, could one maybe find similar models in their community, but then for others out there, like other personal trainers and those folks who are looking to kind of create a little niche for themselves, right? Like what an opportunity you've created for yourself, and the community that you've built. So let's kind of start with a little bit of your backstory, because you're not the first therapist to now kind of take a different, approach to your career. And it's always fascinating to hear those stories. So let's kind of start with your background and what shifted to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. So I'll try to make the long story short, but so I'm a speech and language pathologist. I'm a certified brain injury specialist. And I've been in the field about 15 years. I started my career, interestingly enough, I went into the field of speech pathology wanting to work with individuals with autism, because I really liked sort of the social model, like helping people with their social skills. Got into graduate school, got a placement at Spaulding on the brain injury unit, and was like, never looked back. I just was so fascinated and enthralled with the population and all of the sort of possibilities there, that was kind of where I wanted to go. So I started my career on the brain injury unit at Spaulding. I was there 5 years, and then I transferred over to MGH, inpatient acute neuro. So sort of like right when you've had your stroke or brain injury, doing diagnostic and sort of prognostic work. And about 8 or 9 years ago, I started doing CrossFit and very quickly identified that I wanted to be a trainer. Got certified as a trainer, and within that time period, just thought, wow, like this is a really great place for stroke and brain injury survivors and people in recovery. And that's kind of like the clip version of how I got to where I'm at today.
So Jenna, your congratulations first off. You're in your new facility there, as Mike mentioned, the backdrop, and I love the logo. We're going to talk about that, your tagline, for your new facility in a moment. But you mentioned a little bit about your fitness background. What else? We always like to kind of get started with what else besides the professional side of things. What else, for folks who want to get to know you a little bit? What do you do to relax outside besides your fitness routine? What else do you do that share a fun fact with us?
Relax. I mean, running a small totally relaxing, right? I was a 3-sport athlete. I played basketball and softball in college. So being active has always been kind of like my passion. And I've tried all kinds of different sports. And then finding CrossFit became sort of like that hobby that filled the gap of team sports. But I love to hike. I love the beach. I have 2 dogs. We recently lost our 16-year-old Puggle and then adopted a 1-year-old hound dog with our 11-year-old hound dog. So a lot of time spent outside with dogs, hanging out with friends, doing CrossFit with friends. That's me.
Yeah, CrossFit. I don't know how relaxing that might be, but for some, I guess. Where'd you play basketball and softball?
I went to Simmons, which is a private all women's college here in Boston.
Oh, very cool. I was a basketball player myself, so nice
Love
to
it.
have another ball. That David's the hockey man out of the
Okay.
group,
Okay. Big weekend,
Yeah.
Final Four
Yeah.
tonight.
Yeah. Paige Beck. Who are you going for? Paige Beckers or Caitlin Clark?
I'm not a super fan of anyone. I just love that the growth of the sport and the sort of what it's brought for women's sports. So I'm just enjoying all of the good games.
Yeah. I mean, they're saying this game tonight is going to be the most viewed behind the Super Bowl, I think. So yeah,
I
go
believe
on.
it. I
They
believe
they
it.
deserve it.
We've come a
Uh,
long way in women's sports, so.
yeah, it's nice to see. Um, so let's kind of focus a little bit more on your new setup, right? And kind of that evolution of kind of taking this fit to function movement and kind of, you know, seeing some of the small opportunities when you were starting out in CrossFit and kind of, you know, walk us through how you've kind of developed, you know, this one community and then obviously the business and getting your own location to where you're sitting today.
Yeah, sure. So, I think probably a lot of folks out there, I think people hear CrossFit and they think like, that's crazy. That is just crazy stuff. You think of people throwing big barbells overhead and swinging from the rings and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And what I tell folks is that that's kind of like, speaking of the Super Bowl, that's like the Super Bowl of fitness. That's not what your everyday user is doing, right? And so CrossFit is rooted in what we call functional fitness. So that means that we prioritize the movements that you see out there in everyday life. So what is a squat? It's just getting on and off the couch or sitting on the toilet. What's a deadlift? It's picking up a heavy object. Could be groceries. It could be your dog. It could be a bag of dog food. And even a burpee. What's a burpee? It's just a controlled fall and getting up when you fall. And so in learning about CrossFit as a methodology and how much it can do for people, I just kept looking around the room and thinking, we don't train our individuals who are recovering from brain injury how to do all these things, right? We have our really isolated therapies. And we know that that's important, right? You got to get out of bed, you got to get bathed and dressed, all those early stage things. And I always liken it to, we wrap people up in bubble wrap of safety strategies and mechanisms, and then we send them home. And that's partly the limitations of insurance, right? We're like, okay, you're going home, please be safe. Don't fall. Right. And then my stroke survivors come walking through the door and I say, well, how do you get up when you fall? Or how do you get down to the ground? And they say, well, I don't, my PT said that's not safe. Sure, we don't want you to fall, but we have to teach you the skills because you do fall. Everybody falls. So we have to teach you the skills to get out of those unsafe situations. We have to undo that bubble wrap a little bit. So that helped me sort of identify, like, I want to bring these folks into the gym. And before that, as a speech therapist, speech therapy is really poorly reimbursed. It's the least well reimbursed of all of the therapies. For the most part, insurance doesn't really care if you can talk or if you can remember things. They care if you can walk, right? So if they think about an inpatient stay, that's what they're looking at. So I always worked with people after rehab, after that sort of go home, you're good enough mentality, on their functional, cognitive, and speech skills. Like, what's going to get you back to you? What's going to get you back to work? I worked with a brain injury survivor who had really bad aphasia, and she was young, not even 40, and she was a PE teacher. And she struggled to describe games. Like, she couldn't name the objects in the gym. And so we took pictures, and then we scripted and practiced. Like, how do you give a lesson to a bunch of first graders on how to play a new game, right? And that's that really functional emphasis. So you take that and then you think about functional fitness. And to me, the gym is a place that really blends that opportunity to help people kind of achieve better function, get back to the way that they want to move and think and all of that. So that's kind of the history of the model. And when you think about insurance, kind of goes, you're good enough. Good enough is not good enough for anyone. And stroke survivors deserve an opportunity to recover better than just good enough. So that became our better than good enough slogan.
Really important points you bring up too, Jenna. And it is true. We try to maximize, I don't even say maximize mobility, but try to get safe to get the patient out the door in that acute setting. And then that what next is there's often that big drop off. So when you saw that need and you were already at that point CrossFit trained, so were you already training in, like, I'm trying to see how Fit to Function was born initially and what initial support, because we talked at the open about where you are now, but we also had a call where we talked about, I think you were in transition and you were working out of the Phoenix, as it is in Boston. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So as far as getting folks into the gym, right? Initially, I was doing CrossFit, I was coaching CrossFit, and I took some of those therapy clients I was doing private speech with and just said, hey, will you come into the gym with me? I want to try this thing. full disclosure, I have no idea what I'm doing, right? Like I was like, I don't quite know, but but this is what I know about movement, right? And at the time, I distinctly remember having a conversation with a PT working with someone I was giving private speech to who, he was a hemiplegic. He walked as if that one side didn't function, but on testing he had full hip flexion and extension, right? He could move the leg in isolation, but when he walked, he still walked as if he could not. And I said, you know what, let's just come into the gym and just see. And sure enough, he could squat to depth unsupported. He could deadlift. We got him running. We got him jumping, right? Just kind of applying intensity to these functional things. So that was sort of how I got going. And I'd worked up to a handful of folks just before COVID that I just kind of said, hey, come with me. Trust me. Let's do this thing. And then COVID. And then, all of the shutdown. And then as things started to reopen, I sort of reimagined the program, and I was working out of another gym, Invictus Boston, and they had space that they said, if you want to give this a try, we're not using the space because no one was working in offices downtown. And I started to bring folks in again. And what I found was that there was a boom in the need, because doubling down on there's not enough services, a lot of folks who had their brain injuries during COVID, if they went to rehab, it was as short a stay as possible. Nobody wanted to get sick, and they couldn't have family there. So it was kind of like in, out, and then they went home and they just sat. There were no adaptive sports. There were no clinics. There were no support groups. And so I had this big rush of folks who were like, I have done nothing since my stroke. Please help me. And the program just continued to boom and grow from there. And then I transferred over to the Phoenix as another space that was bigger and more accessible and willing to host us. And I was there for almost 2 years, but ultimately working with individuals with brain injury, as we know, a lot of individuals have cognitive needs that can't be met in a big and loud and crazy and busy space where you can't control all of the elements. And that is sometimes part of the treatment, or we're trying to get them better at the attention piece and all of that. But I needed a space where I could really and truly give individuals what they need, from the quiet to the noisy to the other people here to not. And so about 5 years later, here we are in our own space.
Yeah, you kind of talk to some of those barriers, right? Of a lot of folks being scared to enter a gym, right? Being, thinking, go back to like what you're talking about, like stereotypical CrossFit class, where it's, guys with their shirts off, throwing crazy weight around. Like, it seems like you've done well, and it could be, just one, who you are as a person, your personality, or, a mix of that with your background of being a speech and language therapist, where you were catering and you were working with individuals with neurological conditions, but like you've created a comfortable space, right, for people to come. So walk us through like what, how are you getting clients, like how are people finding out about you? And then once you've kind of made this connection, what's that experience like for a stroke survivor or someone with a neurological condition to kind of start working with you?
Yeah, sure. And I want to touch on one more thing I forgot to say before I get into that feeds into this, is that going back to the CrossFit is scary and it's not for everyone sort of thing. What a lot of people don't recognize is that CrossFit is what we call infinitely scalable and modifiable. So in a room full of people, I could be doing the heavy weights and the crazy gymnastics, and a stroke survivor could be, say it's a barbell deadlift. Someone with hemiplegia could be lifting a small single object with one arm while I'm doing my heavy lift on a big bar, and I might be running while they're maybe using a ski erg, something more accessible. And the idea is that with the right coaching, anything can be scaled and modified down so that we can all do the same thing that is appropriate for our abilities. And so you can walk into a CrossFit gym at any time and see an 80-year-old, 16-year-old, an athlete, and someone who's brand new to the sport.
Same thing as like we think about, sorry to cut you in, but like we've talked about like yoga on the podcast as well, right? Like yoga is one of those things as well that's adaptable and something like, I'd love to, if you do anything around, like, because a big thing with stroke as well is like that mobility, range of motion. So maybe we'll sprinkle some of that in later.
Yeah. And so, tag on to that, I'm certified as what we call an adaptive and inclusive trainer. And so that means that my job is to provide access to fitness. So we take anyone who has a permanent limitation, I'm going to minimize that limitation in order to provide you the most accessible way to do a thing. And so speaking about range of motion, maybe you can't bend far enough to pick something up off the ground. Well, what if I stack something underneath it? I put some plates on the ground and I put your object to lift on top of it. I've now brought the floor to you so you can reach within your range of motion that is safe and that is comfortable. And so that's sort of one of the ways too that we adapt and modify for all of our survivors. So when you think about folks coming to me, a lot of it's word of mouth. I'm starting to get some referrals from PTs and physicians and all of that, which is also wonderful. I try to make it very non-clinical. You know, people kind of show up and they're like, I'm ready to be tested. And I sort of say, you've been through that, right? How many different PTs have you been to, and OTs and neuropsych and all of the tests you've done? We're here to move. And so I put folks, everybody comes in first session free. Just come, just check it out, just see what you think. And I put people through what I call a movement assessment, but really I just look at how they move. We do a little cardio. We do some of those basic functional movements. So we squat, we hinge, we push, and we pull. What does that mean? I look at sit to stands. I see what kind of support you need. I look at picking something up off the ground, and sometimes we get heavy if you can. We do a little bit of ring rowing, so pulling, whether that's with 2 arms or 1, because I always say to people, when you fall, you're most likely to reach up and pull to get yourself up again. So pulling strength matters. And then we look at getting to the floor and back down again. I take those things within their abilities, I mash it into a little 10-minute workout, and they do it. And then we take it from there.
So Jenna, you know, we mentioned at the start that, you know, our common connection was Rory in a previous episode, and he just raved about his experience with you. And he also bragged a little bit about, he sent us a video of, I think he was doing his burpees, and, you know, where he started and where he progressed. Do you bring that in? Like, you have a really strong, like, for anyone, and we'll make sure at the end we do include your social tags and everything, because I noticed on your Instagram there's a lot of video. Are participants encouraged to film themselves where they start and where they go? How do you use that? Like, and maybe, I don't know if we can speak to Rory's case or anyone else that comes to mind about seeing those, you know, because you mentioned PTs are, you know, and other clinicians, OT, speech, we're very much like on all these outcome assessments. And what you said was like, where we need to move to is just where you are. Can you do these functional movements and these mobility, informal, but yet very formal mobility assessments to, you know, shape where they need to go, where they are? Is video part of that at all? Or do you do any of that pre-post, or is it kind of like, if Rory wanted to have that to share with, or for his own records, does he use that way at solo?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I always tell people, never trust a coach with a camera, because I will video everything. I always ask my survivors right off from the get-go, do you mind if I video? For the most part, people are okay with it. And partly because I say you can't know it. You don't know it when you're in it. You don't see it when it's happening. But to see that video of your first session, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, whatever the case may be, is really powerful for people. And I share those with the individuals if they want them. And I ask, you know, I always ask, do you mind if I share your story on Instagram? Because you just never know who's watching, and the reach is really far and really powerful for people. I mean, I get inquiries from around the world. I work with people from around the world. And sometimes I just get a message from someone in Sweden that just says, I watched this. I didn't think I could. And then I did. I went to a gym. And that's really like the goal, right? Is like reaching as many people as possible. When it comes to measurement, CrossFit is actually one of the things they're sort of hailed for. They pride themselves on is that they actually put a measurement to fitness. Because what is fitness? How do you define it, right? And essentially, CrossFit's model is that it's performance across broad time and modal domains. So what does that mean? We take a look at a bunch of different stuff. We time it, we count it, we write down how heavy, we write down how many reps. So even that workout, and I tell them this, day 1, you're going to do a 10-minute, what we call AMRAP, as many rounds as possible of these movements. I write it down. Maybe they did 3 rounds at such weight in 6 weeks or 12 or however, depends how frequent they come, we retest, and the proof is in the punch, right? Numbers don't lie. And so am I assessing you? No, but did you do 3 rounds on this date? and 4 rounds or 5 rounds on this day at a heavier weight, yeah, it's all right there. And so I keep track of all of their data so that they have it, but it's just exercise measures. It's how heavy did you lift? How many did you do? How fast did you do it? And I find too,
Yeah.
it's useful because so often they go, nothing's getting better. I don't feel better. I'm
Right.
feeling, and they
Yeah.
go, oh, hey, look, last time you lifted 20 pounds, this time you lifted 50. And it's like,
Yep.
Yeah. It's that, it helps one with that like intrinsic motivation to continue, right? Like I remember when I was doing CrossFit, like we would have that leaders board, big whiteboard up, and you'd see somebody's name and it'd be a couple seconds, less than yours.
yeah,
And it's like, gives you that little bit of motivation.
yeah,
Um,
sure.
so I want to talk a little bit about like how that has really formed what you've been able to grow, right? Like that one community, but also just your ability to kind of keep people coming back, right? Because you think of the gym and you think of these habit, like what this is 21 days to build a habit, right? And just like how many people have maybe gone and joined a Planet Fitness or some of these big box gyms with good intentions, but it's easy to not go, right? But talk us through like how you've, and I think in your model with a bit more one-on-one instruction and just in a smaller scale, like how do you like what's your craft? Have you been able to kind of create this cocktail that keeps people motivated and coming back?
I think there's a couple things. I mean, one is that everyone has a coach for accountability, right? That's why we have them. I have a coach who tells me what workouts to do. And then when I don't want to do them, I'm like, oh, he's going to be listening, right? He's going to look back at my scores. But I think having someone that you are accountable to helps. I think with my folks, it's very, very, very tailored. I write all of the workouts and I have a plan, but I am apt to change that day of based on how you're feeling, based on how your mood is, based on your other therapies. Whoa. And it's not uncommon. Sorry, my computer just did something funny. It's not uncommon for example, a survivor to come in and be feeling down. I did this thing in PT and I just really struggled with it. Or I was out in the community and I found that I couldn't walk on this trail because it was too uneven. And I'll say, great, let's put it in, let's work on it. And so I think that opportunity to really tailor it to the needs, not just of the person, but the day, the moment, the mood, all of that. And it's a blend for them where some days they just want to work out and not think about their disability. Great. You want to just sweat? Let's do that today. Or you're in the mood where you want to really tackle this hard skill that's really just getting to you because it's impacting either your performance in a therapy or in real life. We can do that too. And I think that makes a big difference for folks. And as far as community, when I started the program, my sort of initial vision was like, I will bring these people in one-on-one and I will sort of onboard them and train them, and then they'll join the gym. That was kind of my goal. And that really hasn't happened. A couple of people have joined the gym, but for the most part, they just keep coming back. And what I just like anything else, some people prefer one-on-one training. That's true in all facets, right? But what I found is that they've formed this really wonderful community with one another, even if they don't see each other. They chat in passing between sessions. They connect on social media. They share ideas. All of them are using sort of the same virtual OT and the same different kind of walking devices and therapeutic. They're sort of like, oh, did you try this? I should try that. And they've sort of formed that bond. And in addition to that, sort of like you talked about, CrossFit has the whiteboard with like who achieved at what. It's not uncommon for them to say to me, oh, well, like, who else did this workout today? Oh, like how fast did Jim do it? Or what was Cheryl's score? Or, and so there's that sort of, even without being in the room together, they sort of know that they're working towards this common goal of better together. And that's been super powerful and really, really cool to see.
Yeah, and it's you've mentioned something around like they're using the same OTs, they're using the, so it's like you're helping them obviously overcome barriers, but then they've been able to form this little group and kind of have similar experiences and help each other. So that has to be a very rewarding side of what you're doing. Now, how does it come? Because and I'm sure hopefully a lot of these individuals, take Rory, for instance, he's working with you, but he's also working with a PT, maybe an OT. Like, how do you do you at all, like, share, and I guess I could take my mom's experience, she was working with a trainer in a gym, but again, also had a PT, right? And like, for her, it was really important, the trainer that she had in the gym reminds me a lot of you, a lot of you, just like how she understood my mom's position, understood what needs to be catered, right? But it was important for my mom as a stroke survivor to like have that connection with her trainer and the PT, right? And almost be able to, and in the perfect world, right, like have you guys be one care team. But realistically, right, like those dots don't always cross. But like how have you, or have you had any experience with your clients, like working with, or at least having a relationship with some of their other care team, right? So whether that's a PT and OT, and like, does that kind of sway or like influence some of what you're doing with them as well?
Yeah, I do think that sort of like continuum of care and that community team-based approach is always going to be the most effective when it's possible. And I always tell folks I'm happy to discuss with any of their community team members, their OT, their PT, whomever. And I've done a bit of that sort of on the backside. I also we're at a point now where for the individuals that are from a cognitive and language perspective able to communicate that stuff on their own, now they'll come in and say, oh, my PT said that you should work on XYZ, or I took what you and I did and I brought it back to PT and then we tried this and this is what we found. And so I, as like a rehab provider, right, who's been in these team settings for all of these years, like that's what I do. I'm so used to that. We collaborate and we work together. So I will say, I'll talk to, let me talk to your OT or your PT if that is organic or people want me to. And sometimes when I'm getting referrals from providers, they'll tell me, hey, these are all the things we're working on. Let me know what you think. And I do think that's important because somebody has to quarterback that care. And I think the therapies, they just don't really work in isolation, right? To get the best bang for your buck, you need to be able to apply those skills across modalities and across settings. And so any time that there is a way to do that, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I think you brought up a really good point in the term you use, quarterback. And we talked about this in the last few episodes where, whose responsibility is it in that transition of care? And I forget the episode that it was where we talked about, I vocalized, it really is, if it's on the PT side for mobility, if the client really wants that community resource and where to go next, it's really your responsibility to know what is in the community that's appropriate, and maybe make that first handoff in that trip with if not we even talked about the potential like we're doing today, and we hope that this exposes more facility or more, opportunities for referring to your facility there in the Boston area, because, you know, as a treating physical therapist, I want more opportunities for my clients, which you offer. And it's sometimes we're time crunched to be able to do the investigative work to see where it's appropriate. So, and when someone finds a facility, we talked about the social part, they're so willing to share, like Rory. He wants people to know what you're offering there because it was such an important step in his recovery journey. Um, so if you're, um, and it takes a lot of time now as a facility owner, like to be able to do this outreach, I mean, PTs want, or OTs and others want to know that they're handing off, like Mike said, he's happy with who he worked or who his mom's working with. Um, is there other outreach opportunities that that you're involved with in the community now? Like I know Rory and myself connected through SIA as well, the Stroke and Young Adults program out of Boston. Are there other opportunities that you know help more people?
Yeah. I mean, I'm always seeking those connections and kind of telling folks about what we do and presenting about what we do to different organizations. So I'm connected now, like with the SIA, the Young Stroke Support Group through Tufts, and we're actually in the midst of their training to run a 5K with Trillium, which it's a Trillium 5K, and it's the fundraising is for Teddy's team, which is for stroke survivors as well. And so I'm helping engage that group in sort of the it's like couch to 5K, but I'm calling it stroke to 5K. So we're working on a running and training program for that. I have the past couple of years I've been doing these virtual chair fitness classes through the BIA, the Brain Injury Association of Massachusetts, which has been wonderful. And it's something that they contract us for, to just kind of get people meet them where they're at in their home, to do a very like adapted and modified fitness to their need. And I've been speaking with different clinics about, there has been a need for, there are certain diagnoses, neurological diagnoses specifically, that really don't have any resources. We know that like stroke, there's not enough, but there are more things for stroke survivors than there are, for example, people with FND, functional neurological disorder, and even CP. And so I've been connected with different orgs about potentially running classes that are like diagnosis specific, to say like, hey, you have a group of folks with FND, bring them in and we'll do caregiver training, things like that. And all of this is still in the works as we're in our new space. And I think that was a big priority for me, like having a space where people who don't have anywhere to be can go, can use, can train. So we're continuing to kind of put ourselves out there and just see who else we can reach. And when I get a lot of inquiries from clinics or PTs or trainers who are like, I met this stroke survivor, or I want to do what you do. And I take all of those calls and I take all of those meetings. And I give all of the advice that I can give, because I always tell folks there just aren't enough people in the world doing this. So if we can get more, we should.
Yeah, that was gonna be my follow. It's like you look at like, the care provider side of the overall issues in healthcare, right? It's just we don't have enough doctors, we don't have enough nurses, we don't have enough therapists, like, and more people are in need of these services each day. So, like, I think you spoke like the cert, or like whatever you went through, it's adaptive fitness, and is that specific to neuro, or like how, yeah,
Yeah.
what type of training, I guess, is out there for
Yeah.
folks trying to get into this?
Yeah. So I always tell folks, and I'm part of the staff at the Adaptive Training Academy. I am the director of content development and the neuro expert on the team. But
Oh,
we basically train trainers to work with people with disabilities. So we have 3 different models. We have an in-person seminar that's a weekend. We have an online cohort where for 5 weeks you come for an hour and we teach you stuff online. And then we have a self-paced where you just kind of go in and follow the modules and get certified. But that training is for anybody: athletes, survivors, coaches, CrossFit trainers, teachers, anyone really can take it. There's no prior cert needed, but essentially what that does is we go through by impairment group, how to train. So how do you train someone with one arm? How do you train someone with one leg? How do you train someone who is seated? And we do neuro and we do intellectual disability as well. So I always tell folks who are just like looking to learn a little bit more about movement, functional movement, with anybody with any kind of limitation, that's how you can kind of get kickstarted in thinking about providing any kind of training for these folks.
cool. Yeah, that's really good to know. And say now you're on the reverse side as a stroke survivor or a caregiver, trying to find a trainer in your local area that is maybe certified in this, or is, going through a course. How would you recommend folks kind of going about that?
I wish there were an easier answer. It's so hard because there just aren't enough, right? So we are actually, through the Adaptive Training Academy, we're working on a trainer directory, like a trainer map for all the
Awesome.
that have been certified. In the meantime, people will just reach out to us and say, hey, do you know someone in Phoenix? And we'll just kind of look back at who we know that's certified. I've been able to send folks to local gyms, local to them gyms. Sometimes people reach out to me on Instagram and say, do you know someone in Texas? I have a stroke survivor that follows along, that I trained remotely, and then for a while, and then she found there was one CrossFit gym in her one small town in Texas. And so she's training there now with the trainer. It's hard though. It's really hard for people to kind of find that. But what I come back to is
Yeah.
that because CrossFit has that infinitely scalable and modifiable mentality, almost any good CrossFit trainer would know how to get someone started because we know how to scale, right? And if they're not sure how to modify, I always say, like, I can help them, or ATA, we can help them, or they can get that certification. But it's tricky. I encourage people to reach out to me if they need help, and I do my best.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such an issue. Like, I'd wonder if, you'd have, say, these, like, I'd love to, I personally work out better in that CrossFit environment, right? And that's still where I don't do CrossFit. I do more like, barbell stuff, but it's like still that big box gym, just atmosphere doesn't really do it for me. But what big box gyms have is probably more the space, right? And maybe like a little side off area. Like, is there any thought around, like, and also these big box gyms are probably more, in some cases, ADA accessible, right? In some cases. Um, is there any, like, in your future, like, thinking and some of the work that you're doing with the Adaptive Training Academy, like, is there any way to have these gyms almost like when you think of like a hospital or a stroke center, right? Like, you're a certified stroke center. Like, is there any ways, like, could we think about ideas of like that in a gym setting, right? Like, this is a gym that's certified for adaptive, training, like, and like
Yeah.
trying to build a model like that
Mike's
could
Mike's
help
giving
like-
you a
people
lot
kind
more
of
homework here
find some of
already.
these.
Well, but actually he's like lobbing me softball, so this is great because I'm
And-
actually with the Adaptive Training Academy. One of the things, along with our trainer directory, that we're working on is what we call an adaptive training affiliation. So if you are a CrossFit gym, you can become ATA affiliated, or it doesn't have to be CrossFit; it could be any gym, and kind of get that mark that says our trainers are adaptive certified. In addition to that, one on the list, the long list of things to do, is that we're going to eventually create a more specialized neuro training. So when folks take our course, they get me teaching them neuro. My lecture is an hour. I mean, how much can you really fit into an hour? Let's be real here. But we've been talking about like a next level for people specifically who want to work with a neuro population, because there's just so much to cover. And that will either be like it'll be like an ATA, FTF cert specifically, but that's kind of coming down the pike. It's something that we know there's a need for, because there are very few trainers, even trainers who work with individuals with disabilities, those who target neuro, it's like the smallest percentage, I would say.
Yeah, perfect. So we know that for many, I just want to make sure that we cover, and I don't want anyone turned away that might not know about opportunities that you offer. And we're going to put all your resources, including, I think, this Adaptive Training Academy and what we just discussed there. But on your Fit to Function, on your website, I did notice that you have opportunities for folks that finances may be a barrier to get started. Can you talk a little bit about that and some of the creative ways you're working around that?
Yeah, sure. So I always tell folks that payment is on what we call a sliding scale, which is a very medical thing to say, but it brings me a little joy. But that just means it's sliding scale based on need. So we have our base rates, we have our package discount deals, but we also I try to meet people where they're at, because let's be honest, living with disability is expensive. And it's important to me that people have the opportunity to train. So we do the best with pricing there. And we also have a scholarship fund. It's small, and it's essentially been raised through the generosity of our followers. It's called the Fitness Fund. It's just a GoFundMe account that lives on my Instagram and my website, where followers can put some money in there, and that goes towards athletes who need training. So what I do with that is I provide folks with 10 sessions for free, essentially, if they qualify for the scholarship program. And the hope is that that's enough to at least give them the functional skills to either get into a gym or kind of run with it and train on their own, depending. Some folks have been able to continue with training after that, depending on either sponsorship by another member or something like that. So we're always working on ways to get funding, but it's important to me that it's affordable and that folks have the opportunity, because I know that there's just not a lot out there.
That's awesome. And, good for you. And like, maybe you could touch on before we get to our magic wand, you know, of these, and I'm sorry we've been referring as clients. I love that you use the term athletes, right? Because that's what we always say on this podcast is you need to train like an athlete poster, right? And it's taking that mindset. You know, it's not everybody again is that, you know, quote unquote athlete that you see on TV. You know, it's being able to have prime your body and treat your body like you are an athlete. So of the athletes that you've trained, right? Like share maybe one or two success stories, you know, someone that really sticks out to you. Could be Rory. Again, we'll give him some shine if you want, but any other folks as well.
Yeah. You know, for me, so that sounds cheesy, but they all shine, right? Like I get like warm fuzzies when I talk about any and all of my athletes, but there are moments that stand out, you know. Rory is a special case. And I won't, he shined on himself a lot. So I'll just give him a little. The thing about Rory is like, he's able-bodied, right? When you look at him, he has limitations, but you can't see them. And that's a big part of my program too, is the folks who nobody knows that what they're dealing with. But when Rory first came to me, he was like, high intensity fitness was off the table. He was taking breaks. He was monitoring his heart rate. He was just kind of like, I can't do this. It will make me, it kind of brings on what feels like his stroke symptoms when he kind of lets his heart rate creep up. And by the end of his sessions with me before they moved south for a little while, I mean, he was cruising his heart rate 170, 180 and be like, no, I don't need rest. I'm going to go. And pushing through things that he never thought that he would do again. And then emailed to say that he'd run a mile, which is huge for him. And so, I mean, he's his own sort of success story and someone who's worked really hard on his own for that. But when I think about some of the other folks, the big things for me are seeing athletes get back to life, get back to living, getting back to doing all of the things that they've wanted to do before. You know, I've one athlete, Lola, who she had her stroke at 40 and she was a dancer and a fitness instructor. She taught spin and yoga and all of these things. And when we met, she said that she was just about to sell her what she referred to as her beloved set of kettlebells because she never thought she would use them again. Lola now, she's been with me over 2 years. She works out on her own. She is dancing again. She is teaching yoga again. She's teaching spin again. And to see her out in the world, she's hiking, she's dancing. She's still got hemiplegia, but she's making it work. She's not afraid of it. And she just goes out and she does the thing. And those are the moments where you're like, this is better than good enough. She's still going, she's still recovering, but she's back to the things that make her feel like her. And anyone doing that's really the powerful stuff. You know, 2 of my athletes went out and got their driver's license back in the time that they've been with me. Like they felt empowered and safe and strong enough to get into a car and out of a car and drive despite their hemiplegia. You know, and I have this one, a lot of folks, I recently had someone who emailed me and she's a stroke survivor and said, I watch your page and I just wonder, like, could I jump again? I'd like to jump too, because jumping is something I do with almost everybody. And I think about this one athlete I had who was very aphasic and didn't have a lot of output, but we got him jumping with support, and he was jumping on you know, up and down, and he went, I can't believe it, and very wide-eyed. And I said, you can't believe it? What do you mean? And he said, I can't believe I'm airborne. Which is like a brilliant paraphasic way to say jumping, right? And it's those moments of, I didn't think I could, and then I did. And I'm still in disbelief that it's even happening. Like those are the things that shine for me.
Well, yeah, so the warm and fuzzies are coming over me now as you just shared those stories, and that's why we got into these professions in the first place. So it's so great to see that you're taking your athletes through that whole process of change. So that is wonderful. Now we do, I feel like we've covered the answer to the magic wand in a lot of ways already, but Mike, go ahead. I always, I want you to have this one, Mike, because you know, I often take over on the magic wand. So go right after.
You do, David. All right. So, you know, Jenna, you've spoke to, you know, you've almost used your magic wand in a sense to like take all your knowledge, again, your personality, your drive and, you know, really your passion for what you do to create something very unique for yourself, right? And you know, that has benefited hundreds and hopefully thousands and thousands of others down the road. But take this magic wand that we're going to hand you right now and, you know, wave that to say, you know, it's not just like what you've done, and what you've done really is magic for a lot of people, but take this and, you know, share with us how you would use that magic wand really to redesign the stroke care pathway here for others who might not be, you know, as close and tied into what you're doing, or able to join Fit to Function, right? Like how does this look across the US, across the globe for a redesigned pathway?
You know, there's so many things that need to be fixed and magicked, but if it, you know, simply put, there'd be better bridges to functional recovery, right? And that would include filling that gap between medicine and recovery with something as easily as accessible as fitness, right? Like fitness should be prescribed. It should be paid for. It should be a part of the package. There isn't a single person in the world who wouldn't do better to get a little fit. And so, you know, we talk about wellness all the time, you know, in CrossFit, we talk about the sickness wellness continuum. Like everybody wants to be well, right? And we send our stroke survivors out and we give them advice on what to eat and how to manage their blood pressure and all of these things. We want them to eat right and sleep right, and we kind of throw all these things they need to do to be well, right? But why can't we be better than well? And what is really the opposite of sickness? It's not just wellness, it's fitness, right? It's building up that body armor to protect against all of the things that can set you back, right? Or lead to another stroke, another brain injury, another fall. And so that magic wand would just be like that we're giving people that here is fitness, go build your body armor, right? Go out into the world and keep recovering and keep improving, because the sky's the limits when you're getting fitter.
Well said. Because we all want to be better than good enough, right?
100%. It's for
Yeah,
everybody
it
and
is.
everybody.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Jenna. If there's anything that, you know, you think we might have missed, I'd like to give you the last voice. But if there isn't, I want to. You've motivated me through your training outlines through the SIA team that I'm I'm trying to get up there in May to get to Trillium. So hopefully, I don't know if you're going to be able to make it yourself, but maybe we'll meet again shortly.
That would be great. Yeah, I will be there. Stroke to 5K for everybody, you know.
Perfect.
So I'm glad that you're following along. I think the only thing we didn't touch on that I would just throw out there, you know, not everybody is totally as aware that besides just the fitness, the physical fitness piece, right? As a speech therapist, language and cognition are near and dear to my heart and things that I treat. And without getting into the details, the evidence now supports that exercise, high intensity exercise, actually promotes new learning, right? We know that fitness changes the brain, and we know that there's potential there to help people recover their cognitive skills, attention, reasoning, language, all of that. So without kind of going deep into the weeds on it, fitness is good for your brain too. And who doesn't need that, right? But especially those with what we call a vulnerable brain, because something has happened. So come in, move your body, learn better, improve better. Better
Sounds
than
like,
good.
yeah, sounds like we're going to have you come on for a deep dive in BDNF at some point, right?
I love me some BDNF. I
All
talk about
right.
BDNF a lot. There's so many angles, right? Like, and
Yes.
it's not only just the new learning, but like the gym is rife with cognitive opportunity for people. So we've got the opportunity to rehab it, help improve it, and help modify for it. So access to fitness is about your cognition and language too, right? Like just because you don't understand maybe the words I'm saying doesn't mean you shouldn't get to move. Just because you can't remember the sets and reps doesn't mean you don't get to do the fitness. So that cognitive and linguistic piece fits
Mhm.
right into the things we're doing in recovery and movement.
All right. Well, part 2 coming soon,
Yep.
I guess.
Let's do it.
Absolutely. We need to.
Yeah. All right. Well, this is a pleasure. Quickly, we could follow you on Instagram, social. What's your handle?
Yeah,
As they say.
yeah, it's Fit to Function Recovery.
Cool. All right.
FITTO. No number two in there, just FITTO, Fit to Function Recovery.
Perfect.
Awesome. And we'll have your contact info in the show notes as well for folks.
Awesome.
Thank you, Jenna.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.